Are you a brand new DM or GM or considering being one, but you don't know where to start? Well, you're in the right place. I'm JW, the DM, and this is the GM Philosophy Channel. The goal of GM Philosophy is to empower game masters to run better games, or, for you newbies, run a game in the first place. There are 4 things you need to have to confidently enough, run your first game. 1. Be familiar, if not fully understanding, of the most important basic core rules of the game. In something like Dungeons & Dragons or Tales of the Valiant, that's combat. 2. Understand the most basic mechanic of the game. Usually that's how to use the dice. 3. Have the right equipment. Whether you're playing in person or online, there are things you'll need, and don't worry, they're pretty basic. And 4, a little preparation. Actually, there's a 5th thing, a little bravery. Trust me, no matter how much you prepare, especially as a new DM, you'll probably be a little scared that you're not ready when the session starts, and that's okay. Jump from the nest anyway. Before I dive in, I want to invite you to the GM Philosophy Discord. It's a great place for both new and veteran GMs alike to help each other out, participate in contests, and be part of a thriving community. And I'll tell you, it's a great community. The link is in the description. Also, hit the like and subscribe buttons and set notifications, the little bell icon, to all. Now, on to describing the 4 things. I'll be using D&D for all my examples here. Number 1, be familiar with the important basic core rules of the game and character creation. RPGs, even the ones referred to as rules light like Knave or Cairn, have a daunting amount of rules covering all sorts of circumstances. Well, maybe not Cairn. I mean, look how thin that book is. D&D is not rules light. Look how big this book is compared to Cairn. And that's without the DM's guide or the monster manual. But let me tell you a secret. You don't need to know all these rules to start playing any RPG game. While you're running a gaming session, you'll find that you often have to make judgment calls on the spot for things you know there's a rule for, but you don't remember that rule. Just make something up and look up the official rule later. That's how some of the best of us learn the rules. Or that's how some of us best learn the rules. Now I'm sounding all egotistical. And by the way, read the rule book anyway. Looking up a rule and even knowing that there's a rule for something in the first place is much easier when you've read the book. Having said that, it is important to know the most important core rules of the game, and I'm going to coin a new term, MICR, or MICR, for most important core rules. As I mentioned, for D&D, the MICR is combat. If you're a dungeon master, be familiar with rolling to hit, armor class, damage, and actions you can take in combat. Now, I highly recommend that you get your hands on a Dungeon Master's screen or a Game Master's screen. These things, boy, are they handy. I tell you, they give you things like the actions that you can take in combat in a nice, nifty cheat sheet style presentation. Let's see, where is it on here? There it is. Actions. Gives it to you in a cheat sheet style presentation along with other good to know basic stuff. And other games may have other MICRs like investigation, but whatever it is, understand it. And understand the basic core rules of your game so you can guide your players through it when that activity happens. It's usually activity specific. Oh, speaking of needing to guide your players through an activity, I suggest you create a character of your own. Not because you'll play them in your game, but so that you become familiar with the process. That'll be important to be able to do later. All right, you don't need to know everything about every class and species and all of that for character creation. Not at this time. But you'll want to know how to make a character and access the rest of the details about a character that's been made. And be familiar with most of the rest of the rules. Not memorized, but familiar. No need to memorize them. Some you'll remember right off the top of your head, and that's great. But for the rest, you'll have an idea of where to look them up after the gaming session, and that's more important than you know for actually learning them. Number 2, and boy was number 1 a long one, understand what the most important dice are and the main way in which they are used. Dungeons & Dragons and Tales of the Valiant are what are called D20 games, D20. That means that the 20-sided die, or D20, is the most used, most important die in the game. The basic mechanic for almost everything in D&D to determine a success or fail outcome is for the DM to pick a target number, and then the DM or player rolls against it. If the roll is the same or higher than the target number, that's a success. If it's below, that's a failure. Now, there might be bonuses or penalties to add to the roll, but that's it. And you can resolve a lot of things on the spot for situations you don't know the rule for, just using that mechanic. Number 3, have the right equipment. This one's easy. If you're running an in-person game, have whatever books you might need available. Have a set of the appropriate dice for the game. One set works, but if you can have a set available for every player, that's ideal. And then have enough paper for everyone. If the game uses character sheets, while plain paper works, if you could have copies of character sheets for everyone and a few to spare because sometimes player characters die, then do that. Pencils and or pens for everyone, of course. And see if you can get someone else to bring food. Don't take on all the responsibility. In fact, maybe a couple of the players could bring pens or dice or something. If you have a couple of experienced players in your game, they may already have enough dice to lend a full set to everybody. Miniatures and set pieces are phenomenal. Miniatures and a dry erase battle map is good. Poker chips as tokens representing PCs and monsters is cool enough. But no miniatures, no tokens, and no battle maps is absolutely just fine, especially for your first games. Not only are many first games played in what we call theater of the mind, that is, through description and our imaginations, many veteran gamers prefer to play that way. And we know this isn't a cheap hobby. If you are interested in using miniatures, you can build up your collection over time. Lastly, being a new DM or GM, try to have that DM screen for your game. I cannot stress how useful they are for new DMs and GMs. It also provides a nice area to hide your notes and, if desired, your rolls. By the way, I suggest that most of your rolls be done in front of the screen. It lets your players know that you're being honest. A lot of DMs also like to keep track of various things like turn order or to put certain character stats on sticky notes attached to the screen and things like that. So the screen has many functions. Now, if you're going to be playing online, the most basic things you'll want are ways to communicate with everyone simultaneously through both voice and text. Discord, for example, makes a great tool for online play if you're going to play Theater of the Mind. And even if you're going to play elsewhere on a VTT. You create a server on Discord and invite your players to join it. You can then make game announcements in the general channel of that server and share the info and send each other stuff there. And then, when it's time for the actual game session, everyone can join in on a voice channel. Come to think of it, using Discord for game announcements and the like still works well for in-person games too. Anyway, another tip. Feel free to use a DM screen for online play. There are some digital PDF screens as well as the physical ones, but I still use a physical one that I've modified over the years. Anyway, they're simply that handy for helping with the most basic activities of a game system. If you want to have access to battle maps and the like for online play, then you'll want to use what's called a virtual tabletop, or VTT. While I think there are better options out there to use when you're a little more advanced, start with simple VTTs like Roll20. Say Foundry, and it can do anything VTT for when you've got the bandwidth to focus all your mind on that complexity rather than solely on your chosen game's MICR. Most VTTs allow you to make free accounts, so you can run basic games there easily. On to number 4, preparation. When you've gotten familiar with the basic core rules, the most basic game mechanic, and have collected or gotten others to provide the equipment, then you want to prepare for your first 2 sessions. That's right, I said 2. That's because one of them is helping the players make their characters and describing the adventure and world a little bit and laying out some house rules, both literal and figurative. That session is called Session 0. Session 0 is a big enough topic to have its own video, but I'll do my best here. Then you'll have the first adventure session, Session 1. You don't need to prepare for both sessions at once, although you might choose to think about the adventure anyway while you're preparing for Session 0. So, Session 0. Remember when I said that you should create a character yourself to learn how it's done? That's because here in Session 0 is where you'll likely be helping other people through the process. But you need to set the stage first and describe your world and/or the adventure to the players. Once everyone is at whichever physical or online space they need to be at and the chatter has died down, you'll want to describe a little bit about the world their characters will be adventuring in, and a little about the campaign, maybe a little teaser about the possible big bad if you have one, maybe just a little something about their first quest. Give them enough to get buy-in into the game and agree to take up quests that you've prepared and stuff, but not enough so that they aren't surprised by anything. That buy-in, by the way, establishes a social contract. They are now expected to play their characters toward accomplishing something. But remember, they can accomplish it any way they want. But that's another topic. Describe what kind of mood you're going to have for the campaign or looking for. Heroic or gritty or comedic or serious or any combination of any number of adjectives. Have a discussion with the players about that and then come to a consensus. Just remember, you yourself have to be relatively happy about the outcome because you're also a player in the game and you need to have fun developing this adventure or campaign. Having gotten buy-in for what the world is, what kind of story you think the players might create with you, and what mood you're shooting for, then it's time to make those characters. The reason why you waited until now is so that the players, guided by you, can attempt making characters that fit the setting, that general story, and that mood. If you happen to have one or more experienced players in the group, you're in great shape. You can have them run you through the process to help ingrain it into your memory. They can also help the newer players. If you know roughly what the first quest is, have the players write a sentence or 3 about why their characters will take up that first quest or start the adventure when they're presented with something we call a hook. A hook is essentially the call to adventure and should be appealing to the player characters or PCs. You need to bait that hook, and these sentences tell you what bait to use. Then, have your players talk to each other about their characters. Let them decide if any of the characters already know each other, how, and stuff like that. If you know where the characters are located at the beginning of the next game session, Session 1, and where they'll be presented with the quest hook, and if they have pre-existing relationships with the other characters, have them write a sentence or 2 about why they're at that starting location and maybe how they got there. Now you've reached the stage where you have to lay down some rules. As a new DM or GM about to run your first adventure, you won't have a lot of house rules for the game yet. However, if you're running an in-person game, you may have actual house rules about how to behave at the house that's hosting the game session. Although not in an actual house, you may still have the same for online spaces that you're getting together in. Whether in person or online, there are some basic things to discuss, such as attendance, lateness, phone use during game sessions, behavior in general, etc. As I mentioned earlier, there probably won't be many house rules, if any, where rules for the game are added, removed, or changed. Doing those things, by the way, is called homebrewing. You can also homebrew other stuff, but that's mostly for another video. You will, however, need to establish the following. 1. Topics that need to be avoided. Very important, both real life and in-game. An example of real life might be that you don't want people to talk about politics while the game is happening. Examples for in-game topics to avoid might be slavery, nudity, sex, child abuse, child deaths, rape, etc. Some of those and others are fine with some tables and make great additions to their campaign stories, but just as often, one or more players really aren't comfortable when those topics come up. Maybe it's simply the concept that's upsetting. Maybe they've experienced real trauma around that topic. It doesn't matter. Ask your players during session 0 what, if any, topics need to be avoided, and then respect and enforce that during the game. Don't forget your own preferences and needs for topics to avoid. If players need to let you know their topics in private, have them direct message you online or have everyone write on paper their topics and give them to you. Even if they don't have one, give them to you so it's anonymous. This is important. 2. Establish safety procedures. Provide ways for your players to communicate when they are uncomfortable with where the events of the game are going, right in game. Some people provide cards, one of which has an X on it, and at least one other, which means, well, I'll get to that. The X means stop. So whatever is happening at that moment in the game needs to stop and be skipped over if kept at all. That's called a line, as in it's a line that can't be crossed. The other card, whatever it is, would indicate what's called a veil. This means that what's happening is acceptable in the abstract, but that there can't be any details. And if things look like they're headed toward being detailed, the scene fades to black, as it were. It happens behind the veil and will not be seen directly. Sex is often a topic that is asked to remain behind the veil. Think PG or PG-13. It can be implied, but not shown. For online play, some VTTs offer safety decks of virtual cards that players may use, but often it's simply easier and better to have the player direct message you when they begin getting uncomfortable. Just make sure you're watching out for messages or on whatever platform you're using, and have alerts set if you can. 3. A third thing to establish is that you are the dungeon master. This means that while you may take others' suggestions and, in the case of having experienced players, their knowledge under advisement, ultimately you have the final and official call for any judgments you make. Do not let players bully you. Rules arguments are not permitted. If some of your players are experienced, maybe let them know that you intend to use them as an in-the-moment resource for rules and for making certain judgments. Just make sure that they also understand that you still have the final word, even though you're a beginning DM. During this part of Session 0, take notes during this discussion. I highly recommend putting those notes together in a document listing all the house rules, topics to avoid, and safety measures, and then distribute it to all the members of your table. As a final note about Session 0, understand that the topics and rules and safety measures may be altered, added to, or subtracted from as time goes by. Every now and then, it's a good idea to have a refresher Session 0, especially when you take on new players, and to distribute a refreshed list of the rules and topics. Finally, it's time for running your first adventure. Oh boy, this could and will be a video all its own. But to keep it as simple as possible, know there are two overarching themes with running a game session: preparation and execution. In the time between Session 0 and Session 1, spend a little time thinking about the characters' backstories and their reasons for taking up the first adventure. Come up with a little information about and a quick description of the starting locale. Take a few moments to define a couple of non-player characters or NPCs that might be important to the first scene, especially if one is the quest giver that kicks off the whole thing, or, one or two NPCs are plenty for the opening area. You can make up any more minor NPCs that the PCs, the player characters, interact with on the spot. Yes, you can. Believe me, you can make stuff up on the spot, even if you don't think you can. We'll get to that later. Think about how you plan to have the quest giver, if you have one, approach the PCs. Or are the party and the quest giver already talking to each other right when you start? Or is there a job board or bunch of rumors that the PCs might hear to kick things off? Then spend time thinking about where the likely first adventure will be happening and what is between that location and the starting location. If you're using a published adventure, or better yet, a one-shot adventure that is meant to be completed in 1 or 2 sessions, then read the passages about anything that happens between point A and point B, and also about whatever parts of the final destination the PCs might get through during that first session. Being a new DM, you probably won't have a good idea of how far that might be. For the purposes of just starting out, assume there will be 3 to 5 encounters total between the trek to the destination and the destination itself, including the destination itself. So, if you figure out 5 encounters worth of adventure, you should be good for that first session. Encounters can be social, combat, or exploration. Exploration encounters tend to be relatively short, but, usually just finding a room and such. But they can certainly get long if it includes dealing with a trap or a puzzle or treasure. Social encounters, sometimes mistakenly called role-playing encounters, all of it's role-playing, can be as short or long as a discussion takes place. They can be a result of exploration, so say the party runs into a bunch of intelligent speaking creatures in the next location. And they can begin or end combat encounters. I won't bother explaining combat encounters. They're self-describing. Just know that they can, over time, get longer and longer. Anyway, get familiar with roughly 5-ish encounters that may happen in the first session after the PCs leave the initial location. And if there are NPCs that might be important for the game or campaign that show up in this stretch of encounters, or if there's a boss to fight, think about their motives and use in the game as well. Well, I think that all DMs and GMs should try running their own homebrew worlds and adventures at some point. I recommend that first-timers use a published adventure or a one-shot. These will not only make your prep easier because a lot of the work has been done for you, but they'll also help you see how adventures are structured and can inspire ways to put together your own adventures later. And if it's an adventure module, you may even decide to follow it all the way through. Always check that you and your players are having fun, and if you are, why change anything? Generally speaking, Preparing the base minimum recommended can take as little as a half hour and as much as 3 hours. But really, an hour is a pretty good benchmark. I, personally, prepare for hours on end, but that's a personal preference. Do as I say, not as I do. For most people, more prep does not generally make a better session, and in fact, some people find it more frustrating because then 90% of their prep will probably go out the window and never be experienced by the players. Next stop, execution. For your first actual gaming session, session 1, you'll want to have all that equipment and other stuff at the ready, ideally before the players get there, but sometimes you can have the players help you set up. So, let everybody chat for a little bit before forcing the start of the game. Maybe play some music in the background if you're able. After a reasonable amount of time, check in and see if everybody's ready to start. If you're playing music, change it to something adventure-y sounding. And if you can make that music the theme song for your games to start each session, that'll be awesome. You'll find that as time goes on, that music playing will get people ready and into the right mood. Once you've got everybody's attention, which you may have to assert getting by saying things like, "Is everybody ready?" or "It's time to go," start reading that description that you created for the opening scene. Now, I like having characters that don't know each other describe themselves and introduce themselves to the rest of the party at this point. If there's a quest giver, describe them physically and then how they approach the party to give them the quest. All right? If there isn't a quest giver, drop strong hints about the ways PCs can find out about an adventure they should go on. Use really strong hints, because it's like high school when you liked someone. What you think is a strong hint might go completely over their heads, and they'll never know you like them. I still have this problem even after all the DMing I've done. Once the PCs have taken the bait, you'll find you have to improvise a bit and do some light steering of what's going on to move the adventure forward. Be careful. If you steer too hard, you're doing what's called railroading and not letting the players make meaningful decisions and decisions that matter. Okay, remember when I said there's a fifth thing needed to run an adventure? That's a little bravery. You may think you can improvise it all, but you can. I swear you can. And once the adventure is underway and the PCs have accepted the hook and taken the bait, you'll find you can keep things moving forward. And anyway, the players will be super understanding about pauses and stumbles and such while you're trying to think of what to say and what's happening. But you've done your homework during your preparation, and you'll be fine. However, be ready, because some or all of that prep won't get used. And that's running a game for you. But you'll find that having done that prep helps you to improvise and move the story forward. Now, run a session or 3, get a feel for what's happening and what you're doing, and then come back here and to other YouTubers and to books and blogs and such and learn how to refine your technique. There are things I've advised in here that you'll stop doing later, and some things that you might develop more. Ultimately, it's about whatever works for you. Hopefully this video has helped you figure out what you need to have and do to go from never DMing to starting your first game session. If you found it useful and you haven't done it yet, hit like and subscribe and the bell icon. And join the GM Philosophy Discord linked below and ask questions and get involved. Not only can you find me as a contributor here, but you can also find me on my own YouTube channel, which is also linked in the description. Come back often to GM Philosophy. We've got some great resources and other creators, including Josh, the GM philosopher himself, for you to continue to take your games to another level. This has been JW the DM. May all your games be full of glory. Till next time.